This lesson is over fraction decimal percent again, but however, what if your percent is over 100% or less than 1%? So before we do that, let's look at our number routine. How do you know? How do you know that 35% is equivalent to 7/20th and 35 hundredths? Well, we know 35% is the same thing as per 100. Can I simplify 3,500? I'm going to use the big 1. I divide both numbers by 5, and that's where I get 7/20th, or 35 hundredths. How do you know? How do you know that 300% is equivalent to 3? How do you know that? Do I even know that? Well, what is a percent again? A percent is anything per 100. Oh, so 100 divided by 300 divided by 100 is 3. Oh, that's how I know. Another way to think about it is, what is 100% equal to? 100%, again, a percent means anything per 100. 100% is 1. So if 100% is 1 whole, 200% is 2 whole, then 300% must be 3 whole. Again, percent means anything out of 100 or per 100, so 300 per 100 is 3. How do you know that 1 and 1/4 is equivalent to 125%? Many ways you can do it. Well, see. Well, do you know that 1/4 is equivalent to 25%? So if 1 whole is 100% and 1/4 is 25%, that's how I know 100 plus 25 is 125%. Another way I can think about it is, can I turn this back into an improper fraction? What's 4 times 1? 4. I add the 1 to it and I get 5/4. How can I turn this to a percent? What is a percent again? Anything per 100. So what can I multiply 5 and 4 by to get 100? I multiply the 4 by 25, and I multiply the 5 by 25, so that's where I get 125 and what's over 100%? 125%. So many ways to do it. So I could turn this into a improper fraction and then multiply by 25 and get 125%. But if I was doing this, I may have just thought 1 is 100%, 1/4 is 25%, together is 125%. And last but not least, how do you know that 75,000 is equivalent to 7 and 5/10%? Well, let's think about it. Many ways you can do this. Well, if I estimate this and I take the 5 away, this could be 7 hundredths. And 7 hundredths is 7%. So this is just a tad 5 thousandths more than this. That's why it's a little more than this. Not a full percent more, but just a little more. So that's why 7.5% or 7/5/10%. Another way I could think about it is, how would you write this in decimal form? 75 thousandths. But again, what is a percent? Percent is anything per 100. So how can I break this down to 100%? I divide by 10 both numbers. 75 divided by 10 is 7 and 5/10, or 7 times 5/10%. This should not be here. And this should not be here. So how can I turn 1,000 to 100? Divide by 10, divide 10, and that's how I get 7.510%. Or I could just estimate. So we are going to practice on different examples. In a class of 25 students, 9 students believe that Mr. Joe will one day quit his teaching job for Tyra Banks. What percent and decimal believe this fact or fiction? Well, that's silly. Of course it is a fact. But so I have 9 students out of 25 students believe I will quit my job. So what is a percent again? A percent is anything per 100. So I multiply the numerator and denominator by 4, and I get 36 hundredths. Or what percent? Again, percent is anything per 100, so 36%. So 36% believe this fact. What percent do not believe it? People don't believe me. If I take away 100 minus 36, it would be 64% do not believe me. So you are at Katie Mills Mall. You are looking for a Thanksgiving outfit. The sign above the clearance rack says take 20% off. What is the fraction and decimal equivalence? Well, we have 20%. We have 20 hundredths. And we have 20 hundredths. So 20% mean anything per 100. 20 hundredths is 20 hundredths. Could I have simplified this? If I divide both numbers by 10, I would get 2 tenths. And if I simplify both numbers by 2, I would get 1/5. If the sign above a clearance rack says take 2% off, write 2% as a fraction decimal. So 2%. Again, what is a percent again? Anything per 100. So what decimal would that be? 2 hundredths. And can I simplify 2 hundredths? Divide both numbers by 2 using the big one, and I get 1/50th. 2 hundredths, 2 hundredths, 2%, all equivalent. And last but not least, if the sign says take 0.2% off, write it as a fraction decimal percent. So we know 0 and 0.2%. What is a percent again? A percent is anything per 100. So how can I write this as a decimal? Well, it's 0.2. Well, I know I am dividing by 100. This, if you divide by 100, will the answer get larger or smaller? It's going to get smaller by how many places? By 2 place values. So it'll be 1, 2. Hence, it'll be decimal 0, 0, 2. Or if you divide 0.2 by 100, this is what you would get. So a percent less than 1% equals a number less than 1/100 or 1/100. A percent greater than 100% will equal a number greater than 1 whole. So to convert a percent into a decimal, you write the percent as per 100. So 125 per 100, or 6/10 per 100. Now you have to divide it and write it as a decimal. So 100, well here you don't have to because it's anything per 100. So 125%. But now we have to turn it to a decimal, so we have to divide it. 125 divided by 100 is 1 25 hundredths. 6/10 divided by 100 is 6,000. A way we can think about it is, if you're dividing by 100, you're making it 2 place values smaller, less than. So we move the place value 2 to the left. So hence, it's 1 25 and 6,000. So helium gas accounts for less than 0 and 1/10% of the atmospheric gases. Express this percent as a decimal and as a mixed number fraction in simplest form. Then interprets its meaning. So what is a percent again? A percent is anything per 100, such as this. Now I need to turn this into a decimal. How can I turn this to a decimal? Well, since I am dividing 1/100 by 100, I am making this smaller, less than, by 2 place values. So if it's currently at 0 and 1/100, I move the decimal 2 places to the left. So I get, this is the final answer. This is the decimal. Or if you divide these two numbers, if I divide these two numbers, 0 and 1/100 by 100, can 100 go into 0? No. Can it go into this one? No. Annex to 0. Can it go into 10? No. Can it, at annex to 0, can it go into 100? One time. So that is our decimal. Express the percent it increased during the second year as a decimal and as a fraction in lowest term. So Kilroy's website has an increase every year for the last 3 years. Express the percent it increased during the second year. So how can I turn this into a fraction? It'll be 115 per 100. And now I need to turn this into a decimal. Well, let's use what we know. If it was just 15%, wouldn't it be 1500s? So if it's 115, it'd be 1 and 1500s would be our decimal. But if you want to know how I came up with that, I divided 115 by 100 per 100. Can 100 go into 115? One time. Our remainder is 15. How can I get rid of this remainder? Per annex a decimal and 0. How many hundreds go in 150? One time. Subtract it. What is your remainder? 50. Can I get rid of this remainder? Annex another 0. How many hundreds go into 500? 5 times. And that is where my decimal comes from. So to convert a decimal or mixed number into a percent, like such as this, you write it as its place value, and then you have to do per 100. So how can you turn 1,000 to 100? I divide both numbers by 10. And so I get 5 divided 10 is 5/10. That's the percent. So another example, if I have 2 and 3/5, can I turn it into a, well, there's a couple ways to do it. Some people know that 3/5 is 60 hundredths, or 60%. And so 2 would be 200, so they combine it to 260%. And that's one way to do it, using estimation skills. Or you can turn this back into an improper fraction of 13/5. Again, 5 we build up to 100 times 20. So that's where I get times 20, 260%. So Jocelyn expects her new software company to increase its sales next year 2 3/4 times their thing. Express this as a percent. So what would this be as a decimal, first of all? 2 75 hundredths. So now let's turn this into a percent. Well, I know, let's think about it. 3/4 is 7,500 or 75%. 2 would be 200, so I predict it is 275%. Another way to think about it is turn this into a improper fraction. That'd be 11/4. And we have to build this up to 100. How can I build this to 100? Times 25 times 25. And that's where I get 275%. And last but not least, the insurance company gear company found out 3 defective gears for every 500 produced. Express this as a fraction and a percent. Well, here's a fraction. Now I need to turn this to a percent. Again, a percent is anything per 100. How can I break this down to 100 or per 100? I divide by 5. And what is 3 divided by 5? 3 divide by 5. Can 5 go in 3? No, 0 times. That's 3. How can I get rid of this remainder? Annex a decimal and 0. Bring it down. How many 5s go in 36? So 0 and 6. And then what percent is that? 0 and 6/10%. So what we're talking about today is, this is a difficult lesson. What the main thing you need to know is a percent is anything per 100. And that's the main thing you need to know from this one. Try to use some estimating skills to turn a fraction into a percent or decimal. You need to build it up or break it down to 100 per 100.